Okay, so we are casting sugar today, and here's what we're doing. So I've got my pot right here boiling. When it reaches 260, which it has reached, you're gonna put your base color in. So I'm gonna put my base color. My base color is gonna be blue, so I'm gonna add that in there. Just a little squirt in there. Now I'm gonna be marbleizing, and the marbleization is gonna happen with the liquid gel. Remember to only use these bottles or your airbrush bottles, okay? The ones that say airbrush. But the only other one, if you're marbleizing, we're gonna use a little bit of this one, which is a gel, but for marbling, we're not gonna put a ton of it in there. It's gonna allow us to have marble. You'll see that when it happens. 320 is gonna be what we're going to. When you're setting up your station before you're boiling, you're gonna have wooden board, a piece of parchment paper, and then a silk pad. Now the parchment paper is set in there to make a barrier. If you don't have that in there, sometimes when the hot liquid goes in there, it creates a suction and then it's hard to get our molds off. So you want to have a barrier of parchment paper in between. Now you can choose whatever you want as long as it isn't bigger than the 12-inch board that you're going to place it on. So metal rings work great. If you're using a metal ring, and you can have several panes of sugar, as much as your 2 pounds will give you. And then if you're using metal, you're going to spray it with the Vaseline. Spray it off to the side on parchment paper, not on the silk pad, okay? Spray it over here, and definitely don't spray it on the floor. So right here or in your station on a piece of parchment paper. If you are using anything that's silicone, whether it's these or the noodles, you don't have to use spray. You can just, the sugar will not stick to them. You can use anything I have in the kitchen that is silicone. So if you look in that drawer that says rubber molds, it has a bunch of silicone, different shapes. These you can use as spacers in between, or you can use them as feet, whatever you want to use them as. There's all different ones you can use. There's pyramids and domes and different things. There are some Lego men in there. Now remember, everyone gets excited when they open that drawer. Remember, that's not part of our theme. So do not pick the Lego men. Now, if you want to use metal bars, I have a whole bin out there, so you can create squares, rectangles, squares, or triangles. So there's a bunch of these out here, so you can set up these any way you want to. These are called silicone noodles. The noodles can be also set up, but remember, not bigger than the board. So if you set it up, you can do a teardrop, you can do, you know, whatever. You can even set up a round circle. You can weigh it down with the weights that Chef Newton has outside of her kitchen, but you can do anything like that too, and right onto here. Okay, remember, no spray, anything metal, spray. So I'm gonna do round this time. I'm gonna do 3 rounds, and I'm gonna do some silicone feet, and then that's what I'm gonna use there. If I have anything extra, don't pour it down the drain. It's gonna go into 320, sorry. I'm gonna get there. Set that aside. Now, notice I don't have an ice bath. I don't care if it goes over a little bit because I went to 320. So I'm just gonna let it, because this can go all the way to 330, 340 and be fine because we're not pulling it. So we're just gonna let those bubbles go away. You guys can see in the mirror, all those bubbles, we're gonna let that rest and cool. So what I was saying before is, don't pour your extra sugar down the drain. Get as much as you can out of the pan like you did yesterday, and then let it rest, and then let it soak, okay? Bubbles, see how the large bubbles there? Stay calm, don't do anything yet. If we put this in too quickly or we cast too quickly, what's gonna happen is the bubbles are going to put a lot of air into that, and you won't have a nice solid piece of sugar. So you gotta be patient, you gotta wait. There's no reason to rush. If you want to marble other colors into this, you can, but if you put too much color into this and the sugar can't absorb it, it's going to weep out and you're gonna be sticky and the sugar's not gonna hold up. So we get real excited about color, but don't get too crazy. I'm gonna add a little more green, so I'm gonna do just a couple drops. So that's what I mean, a little drop is fine. Dunking in and squeezing too many colors into here is not going to be a good quality sugar when you cast it. When I add this, I'm just going to squeeze and squiggle this in here, and it's gonna react. So what I love about this is it just starts doing this woo, woo, all over the place and makes a great marbleization within that. If you want to do, you can do any color your base you want with, but remember that you've already have colors in your sugar, so you want stuff to match. So don't, you know, even if it's, I mean, some people think, oh, I want it to be green grass, or I want it to be blue water, but it's okay if you just try to match the colors that you're using. So I could even do, I have a little bit of orange in my flowers. I could drop in a little bit of orange if I wanted to after the white, because that will coordinate with my color theme that I have in my piece. So don't get so set on it has to be dirt, ground, grass, water. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so a little abstract. So the bubbles are getting much smaller. I'm going to show you how much white goes in there. So I'm just going to squiggle. It's pretty thick, so you're going to squiggle that around and let that just kind of get enough to marble.
So a lot, not a little.
Yeah, but it's
Comparative to the food dye.
Right. So this is, it seems like a lot, but it's pretty skinny when it comes out. And then it's already reacting a little bit. And then I'm going to put a couple drops just because I want a little tiny bit of green in there.
Chef, if you wanted to, could you pour off a solid and then marble what's left and then make another cast?
You can do that. So say you wanted to have something solid and your other one's different, you can. And you can even carefully heat it. If it gets too cold, you can heat it back up carefully on low heat to get it to slip out of the pans, because it's going to get colder and thicker. So once I get my two colors in there, I'm going to do, and my white in there, I'm going to do a little technical term here, shaky, shaky, swirl, swirl, shaky, shaky, swirl, swirl. And then you look and see, it's reacting, it's doing its thing, and you never know what you're going to get. It's different every time. It's still bubbling, so I'm going to wait just a minute before I cast that. Sometimes we're so happy with what we get, and sometimes we're like, oh, no, I didn't like it. But I'm happy. I'm feeling fine about it. Just a touch more white, just a little bit. I said I was happy, but now I'm like, well. And then shaky, shaky, swirl, swirl. And that's going to keep reacting.
Yin and yang.
Yes, little stuff there. Now when I go to cast, I'm going to use my bigger piece first because that's the biggest. And when you're casting, you want them to be about the thickness of this ring here. So if they're too thin, they're going to end up breaking on you. If they're too thick, it's just not going to look so nice. So you want to try and go about this thickness here. Okay. All right, let's see what we get. See what happens here. So we're going to cast that.
Trying to avoid bubbles, right?
Yeah, but you got the torch if it happens, so don't worry. Let's see how it's still reacting, the white in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also say you're like, oh, I wanted that to do something else. You can take a skewer, not your knife, but you can take a skewer and you can kind of manipulate it and move it around if you want to get a little more swirl in there.
Barista
Yeah.
technique.
Yes. Yes. And then I want to make sure I have enough feet
If you're a
here.
real barista, you don't need a.
Be very careful, guys, when you're pouring this, because this is probably the hardest thing to pour, is your little feet things, because you're going to want to spill over. So pour slowly, and don't wait till this is so thick that it's globbing all over the place. If you could get a couple little drops, it's not a big deal. But the main thing is you want these to be all about the same size. Otherwise, when you do use them, it's going to sit crooked if they're not the same.
And then what are you using those ones for? That you're-
Spacers in between.
Okay.
Yep, so look up at the one that's up on the shelf there, and you'll see how I have spaces in between my panes of sugar. And you don't have to do this, but this is an option. And then remember, even if you filled everything you want and you still have sugar, pour it somewhere. Even if it's on one of our black mats that we had, you want to make sure that it doesn't stay in the pot, take forever to wash, and you don't want it down the drain. See, I got a couple little drops there, but that's no big deal. Those will pick away. And I still have this one. I'll pour the rest in this one. Maybe this one. Maybe, and I still got a little bit more. Get everything you can out.
Sorry.
Okay.
So you get 3 levels to yours?
Yeah, 3, and maybe, so I always pour more. Sometimes I'll use it, sometimes I won't, but at least I'm prepared. What if I plan on just having this one and it breaks? So I got a plan for backup in case it does break. So that's it for casting. You know, this one kind of, I still have time, I can move this one around. Sometimes the white wants to come to the surface, so I'm just gonna give that a little more swirl to get in there.
That's cool.
Yeah, a little bit more there. So there we go. And I bet everybody, even if you pick the same colors as other people, it always comes out different. It always does. Okay, so your turn to cast. And if you have questions, let me know. But make sure before you start boiling, everything is ready to go. Now, there's 10 of you, right? Or 9 of 8, or whoever's here today. But we don't have that many burners. The cassette burners is what you're going to use today if you don't have a stove. You don't want to blow the circuit. So just a little quick, I'll show you guys the cassette burners once again.